Okay, welcome back to the endocrine system, part 3. All right, so let's start with the thyroid gland. You guys have seen this. This should be fairly familiar to you. So here it's that you can see it on this drawing. Here it is in real life. Kind of see its position on the individual. Has a very rich blood supply, right? There's a wing of it on each side of the trachea. If we look at its histology, there are follicles, right? We saw that. So here we have our follicular cells surrounding a follicle. There's the colloid in the middle, and then there are these parafollicular cells on the periphery. The thyroid hormone, so basically the colloid is going to be the thyroid hormones. It's mainly responsible for controlling the speed of your body's metabolism, right? In infants, it's really important for proper brain development. You can see that it comes in two different forms. There's a T4 and T3 format. T4 is largely inactive. However, T3 is the active form. And you can see in the next statement, so your body produces it as T4, which again is the more inactive form, and then it's quickly converted into T3. Okay. So again, it's to impact your cells and their functioning of them and their ability to grow and metabolize. So basically, the sum of all the chemical and mechanical processes in the body, right? So in between the cells, again, are those parafollicular cells. They produce calcitonin, and more on that in a moment. On the back side of the thyroid gland are the parathyroid glands. It's a set of 4 small, they're roughly the size of a green pea sized glands. And the job of the parathyroid, along with the calcitonin from the thyroid gland, is to help regulate blood calcium levels. So maybe you remember this from 201. We'll just follow this diagram according to the numbers, and hopefully it'll make sense to you. So let's say we have high levels of calcium in the blood, right? Those high levels of calcium in the blood will stimulate the thyroid gland, specifically the parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland, and that's going to release calcitonin, right? That's what that CT is standing for. So you can see, all right, thyroid hormones releasing calcitonin. Calcitonin inhibits osteoclasts. Remember, osteoclasts were those cells that break down bone. And by inhibiting osteoclasts, it will decrease blood calcium levels. Low levels of calcium in the blood will then stimulate parathyroid gland, and particularly chief cells in the parathyroid gland, to reduce more parathyroid hormone. They did not give that one a very clever name, right? Parathyroid hormone will promote the reabsorption of calcium from the bone extracellular matrix, meaning that it will stimulate osteoclast activity so that osteoclasts break down bone, releasing all that calcium into the bloodstream. It prevents the loss of calcium in urine, and by doing that, right, so you're reabsorbing calcium in the renal system, increasing your blood calcium levels through the breakdown of bone as well as the reabsorption of calcium. It also stimulates the release of calcitriol, right? If you remember this, we talked about this before too. Calcitriol will stimulate the absorption of calcium from food. So all of those things, the breakdown of bone, the reabsorption of calcium from the urinary system, as well as the absorption of calcium from our digestive tract, will increase our blood calcium levels. And again, if they get too high, then calcitonin says, let's store it away in bone. Stop releasing it. We're going to store it away in bone. Then we go back here. If it gets too low, then we say, let's absorb some more. Too high, too low. So we have sort of this, again, this is sort of back and forth, keeping our homeostasis of calcium levels. Because again, that's really important for things like, heart muscle contractions, as well as skeletal muscle contractions, for example, and even neurotransmitter release. So it's used throughout the body in order to, basically stay alive. Okay, next glands up are going to be your adrenal glands. They're just on top of the kidneys. You see one on top of each kidney. We looked at these underneath the microscope. So if you remember, the cortex was really thick, right? So you'll see that There's 3 different parts to it: the zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis, and then you see the adrenal medulla down here, or like just a corner of it. So you'll see that in each one of these, we're releasing something slightly different. So in this upper portion of the adrenal cortex, you're releasing aldosterone mostly. In the fasciculata, or this thicker middle part, that's where cortisol is coming from. And then this lower portion, or I guess the deepmost portion of the cortex, you're releasing androgens or testosterone, essentially. So again, both males and females have testosterone. It's just that males produce a lot more of it than females. And for women, most of our testosterone comes from our adrenal gland. And really, this is just a reminder, since we've talked so much about aldosterone, right? You have dehydration or sodium deficiency or blood loss, which results in a decrease in blood volume. If we lose blood volume, we lose blood pressure. Those juxtaglomerular cells of the kidney recognize that. They will release renin. That renin converts angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1, which then gets converted into angiotensin 2 by angiotensin converting enzyme. And in the pathway that we're talking about right now, that will stimulate the adrenal cortex to release aldosterone. Aldosterone will increase the reabsorption of sodium, which will then increase blood volume, right? Because wherever salt goes, water essentially follows. And by increasing blood volume, blood pressure should hopefully increase. So that's just a reminder from the urinary system. All right, and here's another throwback organ that we've seen in the digestive system. Here's the pancreas, right? You should recognize the duodenum. Here's that celiac trunk, spleen. Most of the pancreas is devoted to producing digestive enzymes. We spent a lot of time on that in the digestive system. It's just those pancreatic islets that are producing hormones. There are actually 4 different types of cells in those pancreatic islets, so it's not just one type. The larger portion of them are producing insulin, right? Again, the job of insulin is to help cells take in glucose into themselves, so decreasing blood glucose and putting it into cells. Glucagon is going to be the exact opposite. It basically is increasing blood glucose levels or preventing cells from absorbing glucose. Delta cells produce something called somatostatin, which helps suppress the secretion of digestive hormones. And then there's something called a pancreatic polypeptide that stimulates chief cells in the stomach, and it decreases pancreatic and bile secretion. So these two, even though their hormones play a role in the digestive system, and I guess these two do to a certain extent too, but really they're regulating blood sugar levels, either decreasing blood sugar levels in the case of insulin or increasing them in the case of glucagon. All right, so this one's a shorter video. If you have any questions on these organs, please let me know.